Welcome to this week's Facebook Live. And I'm wanting to talk to you tonight about how your undone things can drain your energy and actually steal, in a way, your sense of calm and almost even your happiness, which might sound really strong, but it's actually quite possible. So I want to talk to you, first of all, about what I mean by undone things. So undone things are, of course, things that aren't done. Their incompletions is another word that I've used in the past. And what I mean by that is things that are not in their usual state. So you've started something, but you haven't finished it. And a really good way to explain it is if I give you examples. So when I can think of both examples at home, so in our personal lives and also in our businesses. When I think about our personal lives, the undone things can often be, for instance, you've got a shirt that the button has come loose, or it's actually come off and you need to replace the button. And you're waiting for some time when you can actually sit down and do it. And in the meantime, that buttonless shirt, or almost buttonless shirt, is sitting somewhere. Maybe if you have a sewing box, it's in that. It could be in a pile of other things anywhere, really. It could be your dining room table, it can be in your spare room, wherever. And that's the point, is that a lot of our undone things, certainly that I'm referring to, are actually not in their usual places. They're not in their usual homes. And that's part of the incompletion, because they're not where they're meant to be or where they usually are. So that's one example. Another one is even ironing. So if you still do ironing, and I try to avoid that as much as I can by actually not needing to iron. But if you do have some things, and I still do, I have like linen clothes and that sort of thing that I have to iron. If we have a stack of ironing that just gets bigger and bigger, that's a whole lot of undone things. With, in this case, the ironing not being done. It can also be even things like, often with families, we can have a whole lot of stuff by the front door that we're waiting to transport, to take out of the house, maybe into the garage, or it could be the back door if it's not the front door. Or we're taking it to somebody's house, or giving it to somebody, or taking it to work or whatever. And what I'm particularly referring to is when things are left undone for quite some time. So if it's a morning tea and you've, at work and you've made a cake, for instance, and you've got it there ready to take, that's fine. It's only there for a short time. What I'm referring to is things that you've been meaning to take to maybe to the op shop, that have got piled, let's say by the front door or the back door, or in the hallway or spare room or whatever, that are just sitting there and sitting there. And you get to the point where you walk straight past them, and consciously you're not even aware that they're any longer there. It's like your mind seemingly doesn't notice them. You don't consciously notice them. And every now and again you might actually then see them and then think, yeah, I'll get on to that. I'll do that tomorrow. Or I'll do that on the weekend when I've got more time. Or whatever. Other examples can be things that need, I think a great example is things that need super gluing. So they need sticking together because they're broken bits, they're chips off something, could be the kids' toys that need re-gluing or whatever it is. And they can often, of course not always, but often be gathering dust, so to speak, because we're waiting for a spare moment to do it. And as I said, it's this waiting period. It's this length of time that is more than momentary, where things are left undone. And if I think of examples with business, I think a great example of that is actually papers that are waiting to be filed? Do you have, let me ask you, do you have a great big pile of papers related to your business in some way that you know you need to file if you still use a filing cabinet, or you need to sort through to decide if you still need it? Maybe they're from a particular meeting and you know that you've got to do some work related to it, but the work isn't scheduled just for now. And so you can have lots of, and people unfortunately can have lots of piles of things in their offices to go through. Papers is definitely a common one, or it could be bills, and of course those could be personal as well as business related. So again, there's this idea that things are not in their normal place, and that they're actually staying out of their normal place for quite some time. There also could be in your office, it could also be a whole lot of books that you have bought, maybe, as learning material that you have been meaning to read, and they're not put away neatly, and time goes past and they're sitting there and sitting there and sitting there. And so there's no actual action with completing the process of what you actually want to be doing with them, in this case the reading, or with the papers, actually filing them or sorting through them in whatever way. So I think that hopefully gives you an idea of the sorts of things that I'm referring to with this. And I actually invite you to think about what things, and actually look around and see what things you have, both at home and in your work environment, even if that's at home as well with your business, and look at what are the things that are undone, the incompletions. And most of us have at least some things, and some of us have a lot of incompletions. So what's wrong with that? The challenge with that is, or the difficulty is that, I've said this before, I definitely believe that everything has energy. Everything is energy in the universe, including inanimate objects. Everything has a vibration. And what happens is and certainly my belief, when things are left undone, and as I said, particularly not in their usual environment, there's like an interruption to their usual energy. And what can happen is that it actually, it becomes obvious to our unconscious mind, even if it's not our conscious mind. As I mentioned before, sometimes it can be our conscious mind. Every now and again it will be. But it is always in our radar on the unconscious level. So when I used the example before of walking past things ready to go to the op shop in the hallway, you can literally get to the point where you walk past it so many times that you're not registering it consciously. But your unconscious mind is all the time. And whether you're aware of it or not, what that can mean is that the energy, the vibration of that undone thing or things are actually draining your energy, because our unconscious mind is diverted to it, rather than focusing on what it is that we're actually wanting to be doing at that point in time. What happens is our brains are wired for completion. It's and I've also referred to this in the past as well, it's this idea of us actually wanting, our brains wanting closed loops. And what that means is that the cycle of things to have its completion. So it might be, as I said, the sewing with the button, or a hem on a skirt, or whatever it is. If that's sitting there in a pile for a long period of time waiting to be done, in other words, it's undone, the problem with that is that it actually is an incompletion. It's an open loop, because it's undone, it's waiting to be done. And as I said, our brains much prefer closed loops, so that then we can actually go on to the next thing. What happens then, as I said, is that it drains our energy, our focus, our energy, and we have this open loop. So it actually literally drains our energy. It can actually result in us feeling more tired, of us feeling not as focused, unfocused. And after a while, if we don't do these things, if the longer that they stay and the more undone things you have, it can result in us actually feeling quite sad and down. We mightn't be aware that it's because of those things. We probably aren't, unless you're aware of this phenomenon, so to speak, that I'm talking with you about now. But nevertheless, it can actually impact you negatively. And I do believe that after a period of time, it can actually lower our self-esteem and our sense of happiness, almost to the point where if we can actually feel sad or maybe even depressed. It's amazing the power that energy has when it's drained in this way on us. And as I said, it happens insidiously in this unconscious way. So obviously, we don't want to be feeling like that. And the best way that you can actually close the loop is to attend to that undone thing. So what I suggest you do, as I just mentioned before, is to look around at home and at work and decide which of the things that are undone. And I would actually suggest that you make a list of them. Some sort of like, the old language of an inventory. So you know these are the undone things that need doing. And then what I want you to do is to take one at a time. You might have motivation to, have like it's like decluttering. You want to declutter everything to begin with, but that's often pretty exhausting. So do it in bite-sized chunks, because that way you're actually more likely to keep your motivation and your momentum going. So just decide when you're going to have the time, when you're going to make the time to actually do the undone thing, and put it in your diary or your calendar and put an alarm with it. I actually really encourage that, because we can look at things in our calendar or our diaries at the start of the day, and if you don't have alarms or notifications, hours can go by unless you repeatedly look at your diary, and some of us do and some of us don't. And it's the end of the day and it's like, oh, I didn't sew that button on the shirt. I didn't super glue Johnny's toy. And it means that we don't actually end up doing it. And that then perpetuates the undoneness, which is not a proper word, but that's the word I'm going to be using. It just makes it worse. So really do, as I said, prioritize the time, set aside the time. Just pick one thing. There's no particular order. Hi, Sue. Lovely to see you. No particular order. It's if you want to make the decision as to tackle something small, quite often people will like to tackle the undone things that are small so that they get momentum, get some confidence, start to have their vibration rise or raise and get those feel-good endorphins happening. Thank you. And that can be really good. Or it might be that there is an undone thing that you've really been putting off, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, that you actually would like to tackle. And then you might feel so much better because you've conquered that mountain, so to speak, and then you can get onto the smaller things. So whatever order you do, it's up to you. You be inspired in the moment. I talk a lot about inspiration as the guide for what it is that we do and we choose. So tackle doing that undone thing and putting it back in its rightful home, whether that's in your actual house or business, or whether it's actually then giving it away or doing something to it that it then leaves your environment. But energetically, it will close that loop. Your unconscious will be really happy, and you will actually find a real lift in your energy. And if you can do this regularly, it will actually really help with really improving, as I said, your vibration that you energize at, as well as I'm sure others around you feeling benefit. So the more that you're able to do this regularly, and I suggest that you set aside that time to be able to do it, you might get over this initial amount of undone things, and then actually as they come up, because I'm talking about it, because if you actually take the action, you will become much more aware of when things are undone at the very early stages, and then you can set aside the time to actually do them, whatever doing them actually means. So I invite you to do that. I really encourage you to do that. As usual, any comments that you have, any questions, I'd love you to share with me your experiences of when you've been able to finally do an undone thing. I know for me, a recent one was actually my vacuum cleaner, that for some stupid reason, the automatic cord got tangled up within the actual machine. Nothing I did out of the ordinary, but it's what it did. And I left it undone because I thought, I've got to try and find the receipt. Is it still under warranty? I don't want to have to buy a whole new machine or get it fixed. And so, and this is the thing, when there's lots of different parts to the of doing the undone thing, that complicates it, and then that can mean that we can put it off. And it got to the point, I know, when I walked past it, when I would open up my linen press, I would see it. And it wasn't until I actually consciously realized that, no, this is it. I need to do something about it, that I was able to. So we really want to minimize that time of from when we notice the undone thing to when we actually do them. So that's my little example. As I said, love to hear yours, and let me know how you go if you actually do something with your undone things. As I said, I really encourage you to. Really look forward to hearing your stories about that. And all the best with it. As I said, any questions, please ask. Okay, that's it for this week. Thanks. Bye-bye. Thanks, Sue.